I stood in my own living room, barefoot, exhausted, and surrounded by dishes I didn't eat from, voices I didn't invite, and family members who hadn't lifted a single finger to help. My daughter Jessica's voice rang from the hallway like a command from a boss, not a guest. "Mom, Matt needs the guest room for his parents. Can you sleep in the den?" I froze. The den, the room without heating, with the broken recliner where my late husband used to store his tools. My heart thudded in my chest like it wanted to escape. I turned around slowly, looked at Jessica and her husband Matt, and said words I didn't even know were forming inside me. "I am not your host. I'm your mother, and this house isn't yours." They laughed, still thinking I was just being dramatic. So I walked to my desk, opened the drawer and pulled out the original deed to the land, yellowed, folded, but very real. I held it up in the air, trembling slightly. "You all thought this was part of your future, but my parents gifted this land to me, not to us, not to you, to me. And unless I say otherwise, this house isn't your inheritance. It's not even your Christmas rental." The room went quiet. Jessica's mouth parted like she was about to argue, but nothing came out. Matt turned pale. My youngest son, David, whispered, "Wait, you mean—" And I nodded. "You don't own anything here, not even the right to raise your voice." The Texas sun hung low over Willow Creek on that crisp December morning, casting long shadows across my front porch. I sat in my wicker chair, fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, watching. The neighbors string up Christmas lights across the street. 45 years in this house, and the view never got old. The land beneath me felt like an extension of my bones. Solid, reliable, mine. My husband Richard had been gone for 3 years now. The quiet still felt strange sometimes, but I'd learned to make peace with it. At 70, I'd settled into a rhythm that suited me. Tuesday book, club at the library, Thursday lunches with my friend Elaine, Sunday calls with my youngest David, who lived 2 hours away in Houston. The rest of my time belonged to me. After raising 3 children and working as a high school secretary for 32 years, I'd earned that much. My phone buzzed on the side table. A group text. I fumbled with my reading glasses, tapping the screen with a slightly arthritic finger. "Jessica, just a heads up. Christmas will be at Mom's this year. Matt's family, 6 total, is flying in from Denver. We're thinking buffet-style lunch for 18 to 20 people. Everyone's so excited. Love you." I stared at the message, reading it twice, then a third time. My throat tightened. Christmas? Here? For 20 people? I scrolled up, looking for a previous message I might have missed. Some conversation where I'd agreed to this plan. There was nothing. The phone rang in my hand. Jessica's face appeared on the screen, her professional headshot from the real estate company where she worked. "Mom, did you get my text?" Her voice was bright, efficient. "I did," I said carefully. "But Jessica, I don't remember discussing Christmas here." "Oh, Mom," I could hear her, clicking away at a keyboard in the background. "We just assumed you'd be fine with it. You've always been the holiday MVP. But 20 people? That's a lot, honey. And I haven't done a big Christmas since your father. It's been 3 years, Mom. Don't you think Dad would want us all together?" The Richard card. She played it whenever she needed leverage. "Of course he would, but great. So, Matt's parents arrive on the 23rd. They'll need the guest room, obviously. We figured we'd all come over early on Christmas Day to set up. I've already ordered those gold chargers for the place settings. You know, the ones I showed you from Pinterest." I didn't remember any Pinterest plates. What I remembered was looking forward to a quiet holiday. Maybe having David over for a simple dinner. Maybe driving to see the lights in the town square. "Jess, I don't think—" "Mom," her voice dropped lower, with that edge I recognized from childhood, the tone that preceded tears or accusations. "Please don't ruin Christmas, okay? Matt's whole family is flying in specifically for this. They haven't seen your place since Dad's funeral, and I've told them so much about Christmas at the family homestead." Family homestead? My modest 3-bedroom ranch had never been called that before. "Let me think about it," I said weakly. "There's nothing to think about. It's Christmas." She laughed, but it wasn't really a laugh. "I'll drop by tomorrow with some decorations. Your old ones looked pretty tired last year." After we hung up, I sat there until my coffee turned cold. The sun had moved, behind the oak tree, and my peaceful morning was gone. In its place, a familiar feeling settled in my chest, the weight of expectations I hadn't asked for, but somehow couldn't refuse. My phone dinged again. Jessica. Oh, and don't worry about cleaning out the garage. Matt and his brothers can move those boxes on the 23rd so we can park everyone. Love you. The garage. With Richard's tools, with 45 years of memories I still hadn't fully sorted through. I took a deep breath and typed, Jessica, we need to talk more about this. I'm not sure I'm up for hosting such a big event. 3 dots appeared immediately. Jessica, already bought the plane tickets, Mom. Everyone's counting on you. Don't make this difficult, please. Another message followed quickly. Jessica, BTW, I told everyone. About your cornbread stuffing. That's still your specialty, right? I set the phone down without answering. Inside, I moved slowly around my kitchen, my peaceful, organized kitchen, and tried to imagine it overrun with people I barely knew. The thought made my hands shake. The last big family gathering had been Richard's funeral. All those casseroles, all those sympathetic looks, all those people, telling me to call if I needed anything, then disappearing back into their own lives. Except for David. He'd stayed an extra week, fixing the loose banister on the stairs and taking me to the grocery store when I couldn't remember what I needed. He didn't say much, never had, even as a child, but his presence had been like a warm blanket during the coldest days of my life. I picked up the phone again and dialed his number. Mum, everything okay? His voice was always a comfort, low and steady like Richard's had been. Your sister is planning Christmas here, I said, the words coming out more abruptly than I'd intended. For 20 people. She didn't ask me first. A pause. And you don't want that. It wasn't a question. David had always been able to read between my lines. I don't know. What I want, I lied. But I'm not sure I can handle it. Then tell her no. Simple. Direct. So like him. You know your sister. She's already invited everyone. Made all these plans. Without asking you. A hint of anger colored his words. That's not right, Mom. She means well, I said automatically, the refrain I'd repeated through decades of Jessica's steamrolling. She's just enthusiastic. She's taking advantage of you again. He sighed. Look, I was planning to drive up for Christmas anyway. Want me to come a few days early? Help you deal with this? Relief flooded through me. Would you? I'd feel much better having you here. Of course, and Mom, it's okay to say no, it's your house. After we hung up, I walked through my home, trailing my fingers along the familiar walls. In the living room, family photos lined the mantel, the children's school pictures, Richard and me on our 40th anniversary, my parents standing proudly in front of this very house the day they gifted it to me. My father's voice echoed in my memory. This land is your birthright, Lorraine, not something to be parceled out or divided. Your sanctuary always. I reached the guest room, the one Jessica had already allocated to Matt's parents, and sat on the edge of the bed. Through the window, I could see the pecan tree my father had planted the year I was born. It had weathered storms, drought, and time itself, its roots deep and uncompromising. Perhaps it was time I remembered how to be the same. The week before Christmas arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. Jessica appeared on my doorstep the next day, arms loaded with shopping bags. These new decorations will brighten everything up, she announced, brushing past me into the living room. That old wreath you had last year looked like it was from the 1980s. It was. Richard and I had bought it our first Christmas in this house. I like my old decorations, I said quietly. Jessica was all ready, rearranging my coffee table, shoving aside my books and the ceramic dish where I kept hard candies. Trust me, Mom, Matt's family is very particular about aesthetics. His mother redecorates their whole house every 2 years. This isn't their house, I reminded her. She ignored me, pulling out gold and cream ornaments, artificial garlands with tiny lights embedded in them, and a table runner with sequins that caught the light in harsh glints. I thought we could move the dining table into the living room and set up the folding tables in an L shape, she continued, gesturing around my carefully arranged space. That way, everyone can see each other during dinner. Jessica, I tried again. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with... The doorbell rang. Jessica brightened. That must be Matt. He wanted to check if the yard needed tidying before his parents arrive. Before I could respond, she'd opened the door, and there stood Matt with his practiced smile and designer sunglasses. Behind him was a landscaping truck. Mrs. Carter, he exclaimed, as though we hadn't seen each other at Thanksgiving just 3 weeks ago. How's my favorite mother-in-law? I'm your only mother-in-law, Matt, I said, forcing a smile. He laughed too loudly. Always with the jokes. Listen, I brought Hector to clean up the front yard a bit. The holiday photos will look so much better with fresh mulch and trimmed hedges. Matt, I don't need... It's our gift to you, Jessica interrupted, linking her arm with his. And while Hector works, Matt can check the guest bathroom. The shower pressure was terrible. Last time we stayed. They moved through my house like tour guides in a museum, pointing, critiquing, planning. I followed behind them, increasingly invisible in my own space. The towels in here are pretty worn, Matt commented, running his fingers along my perfectly serviceable guest linens. Mom, do you still have that turkey roasting pan Aunt Linda gave you? Jessica called from the kitchen. We'll need 2 turkeys for this many people. By the time they left 2 hours later, I had a list of tasks a mile long. Buy more wine glasses, clear space in the refrigerator, find extra chairs, move my bedroom television into the guest room because Matt's father likes to watch the financial news before bed. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by Jessica's notes and decoration samples, feeling like I'd been hit by a hurricane. The phone rang. David. How bad is it? He asked without preamble. They brought a landscaper, I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. And Jessica left me a shopping list for my own house. Jesus, he muttered. Mom, you have to put your foot down. I tried. She doesn't listen. Then don't do it. Don't buy anything on that list. Don't. Rearrange your furniture. When she shows up and nothing's ready the way she wanted, she'll have to deal with it. It sounded so simple when he said it, but the thought of the confrontation, of Jessica's hurt looks and Matt's disapproving glances, made my stomach churn. I don't want to ruin everyone's Christmas, I said weakly. What about your Christmas? David's voice was gentle but insistent. What about what you want? What did I want? The question caught me off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked me that, since I had asked myself that I couldn't immediately form an answer. I want peace, I finally said. I want to enjoy my home without feeling like it's being invaded. Then that's what you should have. After we hung up, I walked to the back of the house, to the room that had been Richard's den. Unlike the rest of the house, which I'd gradually updated over the years, this room remained frozen in time. His recliner still sat at an angle to the small television. His fishing magazines still occupied the bookshelf. The heat vent still didn't work properly, a project he'd always meant to fix next weekend. This was the room Jessica expected me to sleep in, while Matt's parents took my comfortable guest room. I ran my hand along Richard's desk, remembering how he'd sit here in the evenings, paying bills or working on his small woodworking projects. In the bottom drawer, he'd kept our important papers, the house insurance, his life insurance policy, our wills. Something tugged at my memory. I pulled open the drawer and rifled through the files until I found it, a faded manila envelope marked property in my father's neat handwriting. Inside was the original deed to the land, transferred to my name alone in 1976. I'd almost forgotten about it. When my parents decided to move to a retirement community in Arizona, they'd given me this property instead of selling it. Land is the only thing they're not making any more of, my father used to say. Hold on to it tight. I smoothed the yellowed paper, reading the legal language that confirmed what I already knew. This house, this land, it was mine. Not jointly owned with Richard, though he'd contributed to improvements over the years. Not partially belonging to my children. Mine alone. For some reason, holding this tangible proof made me stand a little straighter. I carefully returned the deed to its envelope and placed it in my bedroom dresser drawer, just in case. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations I didn't want to make, but couldn't seem to avoid. I bought the extra wine glasses Jessica insisted on. I cleared my personal items from the guest room. I even ordered a second turkey from the butcher in town, though the thought of cooking 2 birds made my arthritic. Hands ache in anticipation. Every night I called David. Every night he encouraged me to stand up for myself, and every night I promised myself that tomorrow would be the day I'd find my voice. But then Jessica would call with another demand. Mom, we need to move your china cabinet to make room for the kids' table. And I'd feel myself folding inward again, the path of least resistance so deeply, worn it was hard to step off it. 3 days before Christmas, Matt showed up unannounced with his brother to just check a few things. They spent an hour in my garage, moving boxes and creating space for what Matt called the Denver contingent's rental cars. When they came inside for water, I overheard Matt say, "Once Mum Carter's gone, we should sell this place and split the proceeds, the land. Alone is worth a fortune now." His brother laughed. "Good luck convincing Jessica's brother. Isn't he some kind of struggling artist? David's never been practical. Besides, Jessica knows how to handle him." The glass in my hand nearly slipped to the floor. They were already divvying up my home, my sanctuary, as if I were already gone. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Richard's absence a physical ache beside me. What would he have done? He'd always been the buffer between Jessica's demands and my acquiescence, gently but firmly drawing boundaries our daughter knew better than to cross. Without him, I'd slipped back into old patterns, the peacemaker, the accommodator, the one who bent so others wouldn't break. But as I finally drifted towards sleep, a new thought surfaced. Maybe it wasn't too late to learn something new, to stand like the pecan tree outside my window, rooted, sturdy and uncompromising in the face of the coming storm. The day before Christmas Eve dawned cold and grey. I woke early, my dreams fragmented by anxiety, and made a pot of coffee stronger than usual. I needed the fortification. Today, Jessica and Matt would arrive with his parents, kicking off the invasion that would culminate in tomorrow's family homestead Christmas. I was buttering my toast when headlights swept across my kitchen window. 7:15 a.m., 3 hours earlier than Jessica had said they'd arrive. "Surprise!" Jessica called as she let herself in with the spare key. "We got an early start to beat traffic." Behind her, Matt ushered in an elegant, older couple. His parents, Diane and Gerald, followed by 2 younger men I recognized as Matt's brothers, though I couldn't remember their names. "Mrs. Carter," Diane exclaimed, air-kissing both my cheeks. "Your home is charming, so retro." I glanced down at my faded flannel robe and slippers. "I wasn't expecting you until later. I'm not even dressed." "Oh, don't mind us," Jessica said, already opening my refrigerator. "We'll just get settled. Mom, where did you put the extra coffee cups? The ones I told you to buy?" I hadn't bought them. I'd forgotten, or perhaps some part of me had rebelled in this small way. "I only have my regular mugs," I said. Jessica's smile tightened. "That's fine, we'll make do." The subtext was clear. I'd already disappointed her, and the day had barely begun. Matt was directing his brothers to bring in luggage. "Mom's room is down the hall to the right," he instructed, pointing toward my bedroom. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice sharper than intended. Matt looked surprised. "For my parents. You said you'd take the den, remember? I hadn't agreed to that, had I? The days had blurred together with so many demands, so many assumptions. I thought they'd use the guest room," I said, confusion mingling with the first sparks of anger. "The guest room is too small for both of them," Jessica interjected, "and Dad's den is practically a bedroom anyway." "It doesn't have a real bed," I pointed out. "Just that old daybed that's more springs than mattress." "You'll manage for a few nights," Jessica said dismissively, turning back to the coffee she was brewing. "It's Christmas, Mom." The words seemed to hang in the air between us. "It's Christmas." The phrase that was supposed to explain everything, excuse everything, overcome any objection. I watched numbly as Matt's parents wheeled their expensive luggage into my bedroom, into the room where Richard and I had slept for 40 years, where his presence still lingered in the reading lamp that remained on his side of the bed, in the drawer that still held his favorite sweater. "This won't work," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. Jessica either didn't hear me or chose to ignore me. She was busy showing Diane my kitchen, explaining apologetically about my outdated appliances, and promising that the holiday meal would still be wonderful, despite my limited setup. I retreated to the bathroom, locked the door and leaned against it. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, pale, uncertain, diminished. When had I become this person? This doormat that my own daughter felt comfortable wiping her feet on? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Mrs. Carter." It was Gerald, Matt's father. "Sorry to disturb you, but do you have any non-dairy creamer? Diane has become very particular about her coffee." I closed my eyes briefly. "No, Gerald, I don't." "Ah, well, perhaps someone could run to the store." The implied someone was clearly me. I opened the door. "There's a supermarket about 10 minutes away. I'm sure Matt knows where it is." Gerald's eyebrows rose slightly at my tone. "I'll let him know," he said, his voice cooling several degrees. By the time I emerged, From the bathroom, properly dressed and with my hair combed, the kitchen had been transformed. My cabinet doors stood open as Jessica rearranged my dishes to make room for the fancy serving platters she'd brought. Matt was in the living room, moving furniture with his brothers to accommodate extra seating. "Mom," Jessica called, "where's that second turkey we talked about? I don't see it in the refrigerator." "It's being delivered this afternoon," I said. "The butcher couldn't prepare it earlier." She frowned. "That's cutting it close. And where are all the groceries for the sides? I sent you that list 3 days ago." The list, pages long, with ingredients for dishes I'd never heard of. Quinoa stuffing, Brussels sprouts with pancetta, something called deconstructed sweet potato, casserole. "I bought what I usually make," I said. "Cornbread stuffing, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes." Jessica set down the plate she was holding with deliberate care. "Mum, I specifically told you Matt's mother is gluten sensitive and his brother is vegetarian now. You mentioned it once in passing," I said, "and I bought some gluten-free bread. There are plenty of vegetable sides. That's not the same as planning a proper meal for dietary restrictions." Her voice rose. "Now I'll have to send Matt to the store and we're already behind schedule for prepping." I felt a headache building behind my eyes. "I'm sorry my groceries aren't up to your standards, Jessica. Perhaps next time you should do the shopping yourself instead of expecting me to read your mind." The kitchen went silent. Jessica stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. Before she could respond, the front door opened and a familiar voice called out, "Mum, you in here?" "David!" I hurried to the entryway, relief washing over me at the sight of my youngest child, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, a small wrapped package tucked under his arm. His beard was neatly trimmed for the occasion, his kind eyes crinkling as he smiled at me. I hugged him tightly. "You're early. I thought you weren't coming until tomorrow." "Changed my plans," he said, his eyes moving past me to take in the chaos of the living room, the strangers occupying my space. "Looks like I timed it right." Jessica appeared beside me. "David, we didn't know you were coming today." Her tone was pleasant enough, but I felt her tension. "Surprise," he said mildly. "Where should I put my stuff? Guest room?" "Actually," Jessica began, "Matt's brothers are taking the guest room. Mom's in the den, and Matt's parents have her room. But there's the couch?" David's eyebrows rose. "Mom's sleeping in the den with the broken heater?" I started to say it was fine, the automatic response of decades, but David was already shaking his head. "No way," he said firmly. "Mom's not sleeping in the den. This is her house." "It's just for a few nights," Jessica insisted. "Matt's parents are older. They need the comfort." "Mom is 70, David replied, his voice deceptively calm. "And last I checked, her name is the only one on the deed." A small silence followed his words. Matt appeared from the living room, his expression guarded. "Everything okay out here?" "Just a mix-up with the sleeping arrangements," Jessica said brightly. "Nothing we can't figure out." David set down his bag. "No mix-up. Mom's sleeping in her own bed. End of discussion." The tension in the air thickened. I found myself holding my breath, caught between my children, like I had been so many times before. Jessica's forceful certainty against David's quiet resolve. "David," I began, "it's not worth fighting over." "Yes, it is," he said, his eyes never leaving Jessica's face. "Because this isn't just about a bed. This is about respect." Jessica's cheeks flushed. "Don't you dare imply I don't respect our mother." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact." David's voice remained level. "You planned a huge event at her house. Without asking. You're rearranging her furniture, criticizing her kitchen, and now you're trying to kick her out of her own bedroom. How is any of that respectful?" Matt stepped forward, his chest slightly puffed. "Hey man, let's dial it back. It's Christmas. We're all family here." "Are we?" David asked. "Because from where I'm standing, you're treating Mom like an inconvenience in her own home." The words hung in the air, sharp and true. I felt something shift inside me, a straightening of my spine, a clearing of vision. "David's right," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in days. "This has gone far enough. Jessica, I'm sleeping in my own bed tonight. Your in-laws can take the guest room as planned." Jessica stared at me, her expression a mixture of shock and betrayal. "Mom, you agreed to all of this. You can't just change everything at the last minute." "I never agreed," I said. "I was informed. There's a difference." Before she could argue further, the doorbell rang again. Matt's sister and her husband had arrived, laden with more luggage and holiday gift bags. The moment of confrontation paused as greetings were exchanged, coats were taken, more coffee was offered. But I could feel it, the temporary nature of this ceasefire, the conversations yet to be had. David stayed close to my side, a quiet sentinel. When the newcomers had been settled in the living room, he touched my elbow gently. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Better now that you're here." He smiled, the same smile he'd had since childhood, slightly crooked, completely genuine. "I brought you something." He handed me the small package he'd carried in. Early Christmas present might come in handy. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with a single word, boundaries. I looked up at him questioningly. "Open it," he urged. The first page contained a handwritten quote. "No is a complete sentence. It does not require justification or explanation." My eyes filled with tears. How had he known exactly what I needed? "Thank you," I whispered. "Just remember," he said, squeezing my hand, "this is your house, your rules, and it's never too late to make that clear." As the day progressed, more relatives arrived. Jessica's children from her first marriage, Matt's cousin and his wife, friends who were practically family, according to Jessica. My modest home groaned under the weight of so many bodies, so many voices, so many expectations. Through it all, I felt a new resolve taking root. David's presence was like a tether to my true self, reminding me with each supportive glance that I was not alone, that my feelings mattered, that my home was indeed my own. That night I slept in my own bed, the journal tucked beneath my pillow like a talisman. Tomorrow would bring Christmas Eve, and with it I suspected the confrontation that could no longer be avoided. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready. Christmas Eve morning broke with unexpected sunshine streaming through my bedroom window. I woke before anyone else, relishing the quiet moments before the house erupted into activity. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, I opened David's journal and began to write, hesitantly at first, then with increasing fluidity, as decades of unspoken thoughts found their way onto the page. I have spent my life making room for others, even when it meant squeezing myself into smaller and smaller spaces. Today, I choose to take up the space that is rightfully mine. The words stared back at me, bold and a little frightening. Could I live up to them? The sound of footsteps interrupted my thoughts. David padded into the kitchen, hair rumpled from sleep. "You're up early," he observed, helping himself to coffee. "Old habits," I said, closing the journal. "How did you sleep on that lumpy couch?" "Better than you would have in the den," he replied with a small smile. "Any regrets about standing your ground?" I considered the question. "No, but it's not over. Jessica was still giving me the cold shoulder when she went to bed." David nodded, unsurprised. "She's always been used to getting her way, especially with you. This is new territory. For both of us," I admitted. We sat in comfortable silence as the house slowly came to life around us. First, Matt's parents emerged, dressed in matching holiday sweaters. Then Matt's brothers, looking hungover from their late night. Finally, Jessica appeared, already fully made up and dressed, her smile firmly in place, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, everyone," she announced. "We have a big day ahead. Mom, I've made a schedule." She handed me a printed itinerary with time slots for cooking, table setting, and even bathroom use for the growing number of guests. I scanned it with mounting disbelief. "Jessica, this is ridiculous. People need to use the bathroom when they need to use it, not according to a schedule. It's just to ensure everything runs smoothly," she said defensively. "With this many people, we need organization." "What we need," I said, "is to remember that this is a family gathering, not a military operation." Jessica's smile tightened. "If you'd prefer chaos, fine. I was only trying to help." Before I could respond, Matt entered the kitchen with a large cardboard box. "Look what I found in the attic. Old Christmas decorations." He set the box on my counter, sending a small avalanche of flour onto the floor. "Oops, sorry about that." "Jessica, honey, your mom's old decorations might work as vintage accents with our modern theme. My old decorations, in my house, as accents to their theme." Something inside me snapped cleanly in two. "Matt," I said, my voice deceptively calm, "please take that box back where you found it. Those aren't decorations we'll be using." Matt looked confused. But Jessica wanted— I don't care what Jessica wanted, I interrupted. Those are my memories, not your vintage accents. And while we're at it, please move that flower off my counter. I need the space. The kitchen fell silent. Jessica stared at me, her expression shifting from surprise to hurt to anger in rapid succession. Mom, she said carefully, I thought we agreed on a golden cream theme. No, you decided on a theme. I never agreed to it. David quietly slipped out of the room, giving me an encouraging nod as he left. This was my battle to fight. Jessica drew herself up. Fine, we'll make do with what's here. But Mom, the turkey needs to go in by 10 if we're going to eat at 2, and I don't see any preparation happening. I looked around my kitchen, cluttered with Jessica's specialty ingredients, rearranged without my permission, taken over entirely. I'm not cooking 2 turkeys, I said. One is enough for everyone, even with leftovers. But we discussed this. No, you instructed and I listened. There's a difference. I straightened my shoulders. Jessica, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the holidays. I really do. But this has gone too far. From now on, anything that happens in my house happens with my explicit agreement, not my silent acquiescence. My agreement. Jessica's face flushed. I can't believe you're doing this on Christmas Eve. Everyone's here. Everything's planned. That's precisely the problem, I replied. Everything was planned without me. The tension might have escalated further had the doorbell not rung, announcing the arrival of more guests. Jessica gave me a look that clearly said our conversation wasn't over, then plastered on her hostess smile and went to greet the newcomers. The rest of the morning passed in a strange détente. I cooked the single turkey my way, using Richard's old recipe with herbs from my garden. Jessica busied herself with her complicated side dishes, our movements in the kitchen a careful choreography of avoidance. By noon, my house was at maximum capacity. Every chair was occupied, every surface covered with glasses or plates or hastily wrapped presents. The noise level rose steadily, conversations overlapping, children running between adults' legs, Christmas music competing with the football game someone had turned on in the living room. I retreated to my bedroom for a moment of peace, only to find Diane, Matt's mother, rummaging through my closet. Can I help you? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. She jumped slightly. Oh, Lorraine, I was just looking for an extra blanket. The guest room gets so chilly at night. The blankets are in the hall closet, I said. Not in my personal closet. Right, of course. She smiled thinly. While I have you alone, I wanted to mention how lovely it would be if you could convince Jessica to host Christmas at their new house next year. They have so much more space, and with your age, all this hosting must be quite taxing. My age. As if 70 made me decrepit. As if this invasion had been my idea. Actually, I said, I won't be hosting Christmas for 20 people ever again. This year was unplanned. Unplanned? Diane looked confused. But Jessica said this was a family tradition. The whole reason Gerald and I flew in was to experience a Carter family Christmas on the homestead. That word again, homestead. Jessica may have exaggerated, I said diplomatically. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on the turkey. I made my way back to the kitchen, weaving through clusters of guests. As I passed the dining room, I overheard Matt in conversation with his father and brothers. The land alone is worth at least $500,000 now, Matt was saying. Once we subdivide, each lot could sell for— Subdivide? I interrupted, stepping into the room. What land are you talking about? The men turned, startled expressions quickly masked by casual smiles. Just real estate talk, Mrs. Carter, Gerald said smoothly. Matt was telling us about a development project near their neighborhood. But Matt's face had flushed guilty red, and I knew they had been discussing my property, my home, planning its future as if I were already gone. Jessica, I called, my voice carrying over the holiday din. Could you join us, please? She appeared a moment later, wineglass in hand. What's up? The stuffing is almost ready. Matt was just discussing subdividing land, I said. I'd like to know which land he's referring to. Jessica shot her husband a warning look. Mom, it's Christmas Eve. Let's not get into business discussions now. I think now is the perfect time, I countered. Especially if the business being discussed is my property. A hush fell over the nearby guests. David materialized at my side, his presence a silent support. Jessica sighed dramatically. Fine. Yes, Matt and I have been looking into options for this property for the future. The market is hot right now, and we thought You thought what? I asked. That you'd carve up the land my parents gave me? That you'd sell off pieces of my home while I'm still living in it? Not while you're living in it, Jessica said quickly. Obviously we'd wait until later. Until I'm dead, you mean? The bluntness of my words made several guests shift uncomfortably. Someone turned down the Christmas music. Mom, please, Jessica lowered her voice. Can we discuss this privately? Why? You've made family decisions without me. You've planned my home's future without me. Why should I extend a courtesy you haven't shown me? Matt stepped forward. Mrs. Carter, Jessica and I only want what's best for everyone. This property is a significant asset that could benefit the whole family if managed properly. Managed properly, I repeated. And who decided you were the proper managers? The room had gone completely silent now. Even the children seemed to sense the tension, clustering near their parents, wide-eyed. I think, David said quietly, that everyone needs to remember whose name is on the deed to this property. Jessica turned to him, irritation flashing across her face. Stay out of this, David. This is between Mom and us. No, I said firmly. David is right. This is about respect and boundaries, and both of you, I looked between Jessica and Matt, have repeatedly crossed mine. Jessica's composure finally cracked. Because you never set any. You've always given in to whatever anyone wanted. How are we supposed to know this time was different? Her words hit me like a physical blow, partly because they contained a kernel of truth. I had been a lifelong accommodator, a peacemaker at my own expense. I had taught my daughter, through years of acquiescence, that my boundaries were theoretical at best, but that didn't excuse what they'd done. You're right, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. I have often put others' needs before my own. That was my choice. But discussing the sale of my property behind my back, planning to profit from my death, that crosses a line no decent person should need to have explicitly drawn for them. The silence that followed was deafening. Matt looked at the floor. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Of shame or anger, I couldn't tell. David cleared his throat. I think the turkey needs checking, and maybe we all need a moment to cool down. The spell broken, guests began to murmur among themselves, drifting towards safer corners of the house. Jessica brushed past me without a word, heading for the kitchen. Matt followed, his father clapping him awkwardly on the shoulder. I stood in the emptying dining room, shaking slightly with adrenaline and emotion. You did good, Mum, David said softly. Did I? I asked. I just ruined Christmas. No, he replied. You just refused to let them ruin you. The Christmas Eve dinner that followed was a masterclass in uncomfortable silence punctuated by forced cheerfulness. Jessica overcompensated with loud, brittle laughter at every weak joke. Matt refilled wineglasses with manic attentiveness. Their performances fooled no one. I sat at the head of my own table, a position Jessica had initially reserved for Gerald, until David quietly moved the place cards, and watched the strained interactions unfold. Children, oblivious to adult tensions, chattered happily about Santa's imminent arrival. Matt's brothers made valiant attempts at sports talk. Diane commented repeatedly on how rustic and quaint everything was, each compliment landing like a small insult. The single turkey, despite Jessica's protests, proved more than adequate. My cornbread stuffing disappeared first, followed by the green bean casserole Jessica had dismissed as too basic for Matt's family. Small victories, but I savored them nonetheless. After dessert, both my pecan pie and Jessica's gluten-free pumpkin tart, guests dispersed throughout the house. Some helped with dishes, others settled in front of the television, a few stepped outside for fresh air. I found myself on the back porch, wrapped in Richard's old cardigan against the evening chill. The stars were particularly bright that Christmas Eve, scattered across the Texas sky like diamond dust. I traced the familiar constellations Richard had taught me decades ago, finding comfort in their constancy. Mum, Jessica's voice came from behind me, uncharacteristically hesitant. Can we talk? I turned to find her standing in the doorway, arms crossed protectively over her chest. Gone was the polished real estate agent, the efficient holiday coordinator. In her place stood my daughter, vulnerable, uncertain. Of course, I said, gesturing to the empty chair beside me. She sat, her posture stiff. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I'm sorry, she finally said, the words coming out in a rush. About the land discussion. Matt and I shouldn't have talked about that without you. It was an apology, but a narrow one. specific to the land, not to the larger pattern of disrespect. "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said carefully. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of contrition and frustration. "But Mum, you have to understand, we're just trying to plan for the future, for all of us." "Jessica," I sighed. "There's a difference between planning for the future and planning my future without me." "I know, but—" She stopped, visibly gathering her thoughts. "It's just that you've never been interested in financial matters. Dad always handled everything, and then after he died, you seemed content to just exist. No plans, no investments, no forward thinking." I bristled at her characterization. "I've managed quite well on my own these past 3 years." "Yes, but for how long? This house is too big for one person. The maintenance alone must be overwhelming, and the property taxes keep rising." "I'm aware of my expenses," I interrupted, "and I'm quite capable of making my own decisions about my living situation." Jessica's expression hardened slightly. "Are you, though? Because from where I sit, you've been stuck in the past since Dad died. Nothing changes here, nothing moves forward." Her words struck a nerve. There was some truth in them. I had found comfort in maintaining Richard's presence through our shared spaces, our routines, but her assumption that this represented weakness rather than choice angered me. "Not changing things doesn't mean I can't," I said. "It means I choose not to. There's a difference." "But why?" Genuine confusion colored her voice. "Why live surrounded by Dad's old things? Why stay in this big house alone? Why not make changes that could benefit everyone?" "By everyone, you mean you and Matt?" Jessica flushed. "That's not fair. We're thinking about the whole family's future." "No," I said gently. "You're thinking about what you want my assets to do for you. That's not the same thing." She started to protest, but I held up my hand. "Jessica, I love you. You're my daughter, and nothing will ever change that. But we need to be clear about something. This house, this land, it's mine, not a family asset to be managed or divided. Mine to live in as I choose, for as long as I choose." "And after?" she asked, her voice small. "After I'm gone?" I looked up at the stars again. "That's for me to decide, not for you to plan." A long silence stretched between us. From inside the house came the faint sounds of Christmas music, laughter, life going on despite our difficult conversation. "I didn't mean to take over your Christmas," Jessica finally said, changing tactics. "I just wanted everyone to have a good time." "On your terms," I pointed out. "In my home." She nodded reluctantly. "I guess I did bulldoze you a bit." "A bit?" I raised an eyebrow. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Okay, a lot. I've always been that way, haven't I? Even as a little girl." "You came out of the womb with opinions," I agreed, my own lips twitching. "Your father used to say you'd argue with a fence post if it stood in your way." Jessica laughed softly, a genuine sound that eased some of the tension between us. "I miss him." "So do I. Every day." Another silence. More comfortable this time. "Matt and I can take his parents to a hotel tomorrow," Jessica offered unexpectedly. "Give you back your space." I considered the olive branch. Part of me wanted to accept immediately, to reclaim my quiet house. But another part recognized the gesture for what it was, Jessica's attempt at making amends. "That's not necessary," I said. "They can stay as planned." "But Jessica—" I looked at her directly. "This is the last time I host a large gathering I didn't explicitly agree to. Are we clear?" She nodded, properly chastened, crystal clear. As she stood to go back inside, she hesitated. "Mom, for what it's worth, I really do want what's best for you." "I know you do, honey. We just have different ideas about what that is." After she left, I remained on the porch, reflecting on our conversation. It wasn't a complete resolution. Jessica hadn't fully acknowledged the deeper pattern of disrespect, and I doubted her attitudes about my independence had truly changed. But it was a start. When I finally went back inside, the living room had been transformed. The artificial decorations Jessica had brought remained, but interspersed among them were my old ornaments. The hand-painted ceramic angels Richard and I had collected each year of our marriage, the children's handmade treasures from elementary school, the faded star that had topped our first Christmas tree. David stood by the fireplace, adjusting the placement of a particularly delicate angel. He looked up as I entered. "Hope you don't mind," he said. "Found your decoration boxes in the attic. Thought they deserved to be seen." My throat tightened with emotion. "They're perfect." Around the room, the gathering had mellowed. Matt was playing a board game with his brothers, less brash than earlier. Jessica was showing her old photo albums to Diane, who seemed genuinely interested. The children had fallen asleep in various corners, exhausted from the day's excitement. It wasn't the Christmas Eve I'd anticipated, either the quiet celebration I'd initially wanted or the chaotic takeover I'd dreaded. It was something in between, imperfect but bearable. David came to stand beside me, his shoulder gently brushing mine. "You doing okay?" I nodded. Jessica and I talked. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. "That's something," he said, "more than we usually get from her." I looked at him, my youngest, my quiet champion. "Thank you for being here, for helping me find my voice." He smiled, that same crooked smile that had lit up my world since he was a toddler. "You always had a voice, Mum. You just needed to remember how to use it." Later, as the house finally quieted and guests retreated to their assigned rooms, I sat alone in the living room, the Christmas tree lights, casting colorful shadows across the walls. In my hands, I held the journal David had given me, open to a fresh page. "Today I stood my ground," I wrote. Not perfectly, not completely, but I began. I thought about the deed still tucked safely in my dresser drawer. Tomorrow, after the presents were opened and the Christmas dinner consumed, I would show it to everyone. Not as a threat, but as a statement of fact. My house, my terms, my life. As I closed the journal, my gaze fell on Richard's photograph on the mantel. He seemed to be smiling at me with particular pride tonight. "I'm learning," I whispered to him. "Better late than never, right?" Outside, a light snow began to fall. Rare for Texas, magical for Christmas. I watched the flakes dance in the porch light, each one unique, each one following its own path to earth. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, I felt stronger than I had in years, ready to face whatever came next, ready to be not just the keeper of this house, but its rightful owner in every sense of the word. Christmas morning arrived with unexpected beauty. The light dusting of snow from the night before had transformed my yard into a glistening wonderland, the pecan tree's bare branches outlined in white. I woke early, as always, and stood at my bedroom window, savoring the quiet before the house stirred to life. The confrontations of Christmas Eve had left me drained but strangely liberated. For years I'd swallowed my objections, smoothed over conflicts, accommodated everyone's needs but my own. Yesterday I'd finally spoken up. Not perfectly, not completely, but it was a beginning. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting David. Instead, it was Matt and Jessica's 12-year-old son, Tyler, clutching a clumsily wrapped package. "Grandma," he said hesitantly, "can I give you this now, before everyone gets up?" "Of course, sweetheart." I patted the edge of the bed, and he sat beside me, solemnly handing over his gift. I unwrapped it carefully to find a hand-painted bird feeder, the wood slightly warped, the paint uneven, but applied with obvious care. "Dad helped with the cutting," Tyler explained quickly, "but I did all the rest. It's for your backyard. Mum says you like to watch the birds." My heart swelled. In all the holiday chaos, this child had created something specifically for me, not for my house, not for my property, but for me and my simple pleasures. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it. "We'll hang it today, right outside this window so I can see it every morning." Tyler beamed. "Really? You like it?" "I love it," I assured him. "It's my favorite present already." He hugged me impulsively, then darted from the room. Mission accomplished. I sat holding the bird feeder, feeling a curious mix of emotions. Here was proof that not everything was about property values and inheritance. Sometimes, love was as simple as remembering what brought someone joy. By the time I made my way to the kitchen, David was already there, brewing coffee and mixing pancake batter. "Merry Christmas," he greeted me. "Sleep okay?" "Better than expected," I admitted. "Tyler just gave me an early present." I showed him the bird feeder. David smiled. Kids got talent and good taste in grandmothers. Gradually, the house came alive with Christmas morning sounds, children's excited voices, the rustle of wrapping paper, adults yawning their way toward coffee. The tension from the previous day seemed to have dissipated somewhat, replaced by the universal language of holiday gift-giving. Jessica approached me cautiously, offering a steaming mug. "Peppermint mocha," she said, "your favorite." It was a peace offering, and I accepted it with a nod of thanks. Small steps. The present opening extravaganza took over the living room, with everyone gathered around the tree. I sat in Richard's old armchair, watching the proceedings, with a mixture of amusement and detachment. So much excess, so much stuff, especially compared to the quiet Christmases Richard and I had shared in our later years, a book, a sweater, maybe a special bottle of wine. When it came time for my gifts, I received the usual assortment: a floral robe from Jessica, replacing my worn-out one, though I'd had the current one barely 2 years, a gift, certificate for a senior-friendly yoga class from Matt, expensive hand cream from his parents, polite impersonal gifts that suggested obligation rather than insight, except for David's journal, of course, and Tyler's bird feeder. After the presents were opened and breakfast consumed, the day settled into a more relaxed rhythm. The children played with their new toys. The men congregated around the television for football. The women gathered in the kitchen preparing for the less formal Christmas dinner. I excused myself mid-afternoon, retreating to Richard's den, not to sleep there as Jessica had planned, but to retrieve something. From the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath folders of insurance papers and tax returns, I pulled out a thick manila envelope I hadn't looked at in years. When I returned to the living room, most of the adults were there enjoying pre-dinner drinks. Perfect timing. "Everyone," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected, "I have something I'd like to share with you all." Conversations paused. Eyes turned toward me. Jessica looked wary, David encouraging. "Yesterday," I continued, "there was some discussion about the future of this property. I think it's time we clarified exactly what that future might look like." Matt shifted uncomfortably. His father studied his drink with sudden fascination. Jessica opened her mouth to speak, but David caught her eye and shook his head slightly. I opened the envelope and removed several documents, placing them on the coffee table where everyone could see them. "This is the original deed to this property," I explained, pointing to the yellow document on top. "My parents gifted it to me, solely to me in 1976. There are no other names on it, not even Richard's." Murmurs rippled through the room. Diane leaned forward for a better look, her expression calculating. "Next to it," I continued, "is my current will and trust documentation, updated last year with the help of Arthur Jameson, who's been my attorney for 30 years. I hadn't planned to mention the will. The words surprised even me, though they felt right as I spoke them. "Mom," Jessica began, her voice tight, "is this really appropriate Christmas conversation?" "As appropriate as your husband discussing subdividing my property behind my back," I replied calmly. "I think we've established that this holiday has moved beyond conventional social niceties." Matt had the grace to look embarrassed. Gerald cleared his throat. "Lorraine, I hope you don't think we were being presumptuous." "But you were," I interrupted. "All of you. You've been making assumptions about my competence, my future, and my property. So let me be completely clear. This house and land belong to me. Not to any of you. Not to all of you collectively. To me alone." The silence that followed was profound. Even the children sensed the shift in atmosphere, their play growing quieter in the adjacent room. "Furthermore," I continued, my confidence growing, "my will specifies exactly how this property will be handled after I'm gone, which, despite apparent expectations, I don't intend to be anytime soon." Jessica's eyes glistened with unshed tears of frustration or genuine emotion, I couldn't tell. "Mum, we weren't wishing you gone. That's a horrible thing to suggest. Yet you've been planning for it quite thoroughly," I observed, "making decisions about my property as if I were already a memory rather than a person sitting across from you." David moved to stand beside my chair, a silent show of support that meant more than he knew. "What exactly are you saying, Mom?" Jessica asked, a new wariness in her voice. I gathered the documents and returned them to their envelope. "I'm saying that this house, this land, it's not a family asset to be divided or developed. It's my home, my sanctuary, and I intend to keep it exactly as it is for as long as I choose." Matt leaned forward, his real estate instincts apparently overriding his holiday manners. "But Mrs. Carter, surely you can see that property of this size, in this location, represents a significant financial opportunity. The market value alone is irrelevant," I finished for him, "because it's not for sale. Not now, not when I'm gone." His brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean, not when you're gone?" I smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction I hadn't anticipated. "My will contains specific provisions about this property, It will not be sold or developed, ever. Jessica's expression shifted from wariness to alarm. What are you talking about? What provisions? I've arranged for this property to be placed in a conservation trust after my death, I said, the words flowing easily now. The house can be maintained as a family gathering place if you choose or donate it to the Historical Society. But the land itself cannot be subdivided, developed or sold. It will remain intact, as my parents intended when they gave it to me. The shock on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. Matt looked like he'd been slapped. Jessica's mouth opened and closed without sound. Gerald muttered something that sounded suspiciously like outrageous. You can't do that, Jessica finally managed. It's not fair to the family. It's completely fair, David spoke up, his quiet voice cutting through the tension. It's Mom's property, her decision, just like it would be your decision what to do with your house. Jessica rounded on him. Easy for you to say. You're an artist with no financial sense. Some of us have college funds to think about, retirement to plan for. And that's my responsibility. How? I asked gently. Jessica, I love you and your children dearly, but my property is not your financial planning solution. Matt stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You can't just lock up valuable land because of sentiment. Actually, I can, I replied. And I have. The conversation might have deteriorated further had dinner not been announced at that moment. The timing was almost comical, the tension of inheritance disputes broken by the mundane call to turkey and stuffing. As we moved toward the dining room, David squeezed my shoulder. Proud of you, he whispered. Dinner was a subdued affair compared to the previous evening. Jessica maintained a cool politeness, her eyes occasionally darting to the envelope I'd kept beside me. Matt spoke primarily to his brothers, pointedly excluding me from their conversations. Diane made several comments about modern families and how things were different in her day, each barb thinly veiled. I let it all wash over me, focusing instead on the genuine moments. Tyler showing me how to play a game on his new tablet, David's quiet humor, the taste of my mother's cranberry sauce recipe that I made every year. After dinner, as twilight settled over the snow-dusted yard, I slipped outside for a moment of peace. The air was crisp and clean, the sky deepening to indigo. I walked to the old pecan tree, placing my hand on its rough bark, feeling its solidity, its permanence. Grandma, Tyler's voice came from behind me. We're hanging up my bird feeder. Want to help? I turned to find him standing there with David, both bundled against the cold, holding the homemade gift between them. I'd love to, I said, my heart full. As we secured the feeder to a branch within view of my bedroom window, I realized something profound. This was what mattered. Not property values or inheritance or who got what. This moment, this connection, this love, passed between generations without price tags or conditions. The birds will come in the morning, I told Tyler. Cardinals first, probably. They're always the early risers. He grinned. Can I come see them tomorrow before we leave? Absolutely, I promised. We'll have hot chocolate and birdwatch together. Over his head, my eyes met David's. His expression held understanding, approval, and something else, a peace that mirrored what I was beginning to feel myself. The Conservation Trust had been a decision made years ago, after much thought and discussion with my attorney. I'd never told my children about it, partly because it hadn't seemed relevant yet, partly because I'd feared exactly the reaction I'd witnessed today. But now, having spoken the truth, I felt lighter. The deed and the will were no longer secrets but statements of intent. My intent. My choice. As we walked back to the house, Christmas lights twinkling in the early darkness, I realized that in protecting this land, I wasn't just honoring my parents' gift or my own attachment to it. I was preserving something more valuable than real estate, the possibility of moments like this one for generations yet to come. The day after Christmas dawned clear and cold. I woke early, as promised, to watch the birds with Tyler. We sat by my bedroom window, mugs of hot chocolate warming our hands, as the first cardinals indeed appeared at the new feeder. They like it, Tyler whispered, his face alight with wonder. Of course they do, I assured him. You built it with love. We sat in companionable silence, watching the birds come and go. The simple pleasure of this moment, this connection with my grandson, felt like a gift far more precious than anything wrapped under yesterday's tree. Mom says we're leaving today, Tyler said eventually, his voice tinged with disappointment. Yes, I think that's the plan. The exodus had been hastily arranged last night, with Jessica announcing that they needed to get back to prepare for a New Year's party. The actual reason was transparent. The revelations about my will had created an atmosphere too uncomfortable to maintain the pretense of holiday cheer. Will you be sad when we go? Tyler asked, his young face serious. I considered the question honestly. I'll miss you, I told him, but I won't be sad to have my house back to myself. He nodded, accepting this, with the straightforward understanding children often possess. Mom was bossy to you, he observed. I stifled a smile. Your mother has strong opinions. She made you sleep in the den. She tried to, I corrected gently. Tyler's brow furrowed. I heard Dad talking to Uncle Jason about selling your house when you're, He couldn't quite bring himself to say the word dead. My heart sank. So even the children had picked up on the property discussions. What did you think about that? I asked carefully. He shrugged, his eyes on the birds. I didn't like it. This is your house, and I like coming here. He turned to me, his expression suddenly vulnerable. If they sold it, where would I hang my bird feeder? The simple question carried the weight of everything I'd been trying to express to the adults. This wasn't just property. It was connection, continuity, sanctuary. You don't need to worry about that, I assured him. Your bird feeder will always have a place here. Later that morning, the packing began in earnest. Suitcases appeared in hallways. Gifts were consolidated into shopping bags. Children were corralled into outdoor clothes. The house had the feeling of a theater after the final curtain, props being dismantled, actors dropping their roles. Jessica supervised it all with brittle efficiency, barely meeting my eyes. Matt made a point of checking his phone whenever I entered a room, avoiding conversation. His parents thanked me with formal politeness for such an interesting holiday. Only David maintained normalcy, helping carry luggage to cars, entertaining the youngest children with impromptu stories, serving as buffer between me and the chilly silence from Jessica's side of the family. As the cars were being loaded, Jessica finally approached me on the front porch. She'd been crying. I could tell from the slight puffiness around her eyes, though her makeup was impeccable as always. We're ready to go, she said stiffly. I nodded. Drive. Safely. She hesitated, then plunged ahead. Mom, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money. It's about fairness. Fairness, I repeated. Yes, Dad worked on this property too. He put in time, effort, money, and we, your children, grew up here. We have emotional connections too. I studied my daughter's face, seeing beyond the polished exterior to the hurt beneath. Jessica, your father never wanted this land developed. He loved it as it was, trees, open spaces, wildlife. The Conservation Trust was actually his idea initially. This caught her off guard. Dad, but he never said anything. Because it wasn't time yet, I explained. We were still young, still had years ahead of us, at least that's what we thought. Jessica's expression softened slightly. He really wanted that? To preserve it? He did. We talked about it many times. He worried about overdevelopment in Willow Creek, about losing the character of the town to cookie-cutter subdivisions. She absorbed this, her real estate agent's perspective, warring with her memories of her father. But still, the value is not measured only in dollars, I finished for her. Jessica, I'm not leaving you destitute. There will be other assets, other inheritance, but this land stays intact. She sighed, the fight seeming to drain out of her. I should have asked you, she admitted. About Christmas, about all of it. Yes, you should have. She looked away toward the cars where her family waited. I wanted to give the kids the perfect Christmas memory, the kind I had growing up here. The irony wasn't lost on me. By forcing me out of my own bedroom, by criticizing everything from my decorations to my kitchen, she had the grace to look ashamed. I got carried away. I wanted everything to be perfect. Perfect by whose standards? I asked gently. Not mine, not your father's, certainly not David's. I know. She met my eyes finally. I'm sorry, Mum. I really am. The apology felt genuine this time. Not the surface contrition of Christmas Eve, but something deeper. In her expression, I saw a glimmer of recognition, perhaps the beginning of understanding that her way wasn't the only valid approach to life. Thank you, I said simply. Matt called from the car, impatience evident in his voice. Jessica turned to go, then impulsively hugged me, a real embrace, not the air kiss she'd greeted me with days earlier. "I love you, Mom," she whispered, "even when I'm being impossible." "I love you too," I assured her, "even when you're being impossible." She pulled back, a small smile touching her lips. "I'll call next week. Maybe we can have lunch, just us?" "I'd like that." As she walked to the car, Tyler ran back up the porch steps for one more hug. "Take care of the birds." "Grandma," he instructed seriously. "I promise," I told him. I stood on the porch long after the cars had disappeared down the driveway, the silence of their departure a tangible relief. The holiday hurricane had passed, leaving behind scattered evidence of its presence, a forgotten toy under the sofa, a strand of tinsel caught in the carpet, the faint scent of Jessica's perfume lingering in the hallway. David emerged from the house, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. "Peace at last," he observed, handing me one. "Peace at last," I agreed, savoring the first sip. We settled into the porch chairs, despite the chill. The late December sun cast long shadows across the yard, highlighting the simple beauty of the land I'd fought to protect. "You could have told me about the Conservation Trust," David said after a while. "I would have supported you." "I know, but it wasn't about sides or support. It was about what was right for this place." He nodded. "For what it's worth, I think it's the perfect solution. This property isn't meant to be carved up into half-acre lots with matching McMansions." The image made me shudder. "Exactly what your father said." He was a wise man. "So are you," I told him, "though in a different way. You see things others miss." David smiled, that same crooked smile that never failed to warm my heart. "Speaking of seeing things," he said, reaching into his pocket, "I found this while helping Matt's brothers pack." He handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it to find a rough sketch of the property, divided into parcels, with dollar amounts noted beside each section. At the top, in Matt's handwriting, "Carter Property Development Preliminary Estimates." "Where did you find this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Guest room dresser drawer." They'd been more thorough in their planning than we realized. I stared at the paper, at the neat lines carving up my sanctuary, at the cold calculation of profit margins. This tangible evidence of their scheming should have angered me, but instead I felt only a profound sadness for what they valued and for what they couldn't see. "Will you stay a few more days?" I asked David, changing the subject. I couldn't bear to dwell on the sketch. "Actually," he replied, "I was thinking of staying a bit longer than that, if you don't mind the company." I looked at him in surprise. "What about your apartment in Houston? Your work?" He shrugged. "I can paint anywhere, and the apartment lease is up next month anyway." He hesitated, then added, "Truth is, Mom, I've been thinking about moving back to Willow Creek for a while now. Not here, not with you. I know you value your independence, but nearby." The idea filled me with unexpected joy. "I'd like that very much." "Good, because I already put in an application for that little house on Maple Street, the one with the studio space in the back. I knew the place, a charming cottage just 10 minutes from my home, perfect for David's quiet lifestyle and artistic pursuits." "When were you going to tell me?" I asked. "When it was certain. I didn't want to get your hopes up." His consideration touched me deeply, so different from Jessica's. Approach of informing rather than asking, assuming rather than discussing. "Well, I hope it works out," I said, trying to keep my voice level, though my heart was singing. "It would be nice having you close by." "For both of us," he agreed. We sat in comfortable silence as the afternoon light began to fade. From the bird feeder came the cheerful sounds of finches discovering the new source of food. "Tyler will be pleased his creation is a success," David observed. "That boy has a good heart," I said. "He notices things." "Like his grandmother." I smiled at the compliment. "I'm learning to notice more, to speak up more." "Better late than never," David said, echoing my own thoughts from Christmas Eve. As twilight deepened around us, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. The holiday had been chaotic, uncomfortable, revelatory, but necessary. Like a thunderstorm clearing the air, it had swept away pretenses and forced truths into the open. My house was quiet again. My land was protected. My boundaries were at last acknowledged. And most importantly, I had reclaimed not just my physical space, but my voice. The voice that had been too accommodating for too long. The voice that had finally remembered how to say no. Richard would have been proud. Spring came early to Willow Creek that year, By mid-March, the pecan tree outside my window had burst into tender green leaves, and the bird feeder Tyler had made swarmed with colorful visitors. I'd kept my promise, maintaining it through winter storms and filling it faithfully each morning. 3 months had passed since the Christmas confrontation. 3 months of quiet recalibration, of rediscovering the rhythms of my own life without the constant accommodation of others' expectations. David had moved into the cottage on Maple Street in January. True to his word, he maintained his own space while staying close enough for weekly dinners and impromptu visits. His presence in town had become one of my greatest joys, not because I needed him for practical help, though he never hesitated to offer it, but because we shared a natural ease, a mutual respect for boundaries that made our time together all the more valuable. Jessica and I had settled into a new pattern as well. Our weekly lunches had become a tradition, sometimes comfortable, sometimes still strained, but always honest. The property discussion remained a sensitive subject, arising occasionally in careful conversation, but no longer wielded as a weapon or assumed as a right. She'd been shocked when I'd shown her the sketch David had found, her face flushing with embarrassment at the evidence of Matt's presumption. I knew we'd talked about possibilities, she'd admitted, but I didn't realize he'd gone this far in planning. The discovery had prompted her first real confrontation with her husband about his assumptions regarding my property. According to Jessica, it hadn't gone well. Matt remained convinced that I was being financially irresponsible by not developing the land, but at least he'd stopped discussing it openly. As for me, I'd used the winter months for long-delayed projects. I'd finally sorted through Richard's remaining clothes, donating what could be used, and keeping just a few treasured items. I'd repainted the kitchen the sunny yellow I'd always wanted, but Richard had thought too bright. I'd even taken up painting again, converting a corner of the den into a small studio where I could capture the changing light on the fields behind the house. On this particular morning in March, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, reviewing the final paperwork my attorney had prepared. The Conservation Trust was now officially established, the documents ready for my signature. Once executed, the future of this land would be secure regardless of what happened to me. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, but that wasn't unusual these days. David often stopped by on his morning walks, sometimes bringing fresh bread from the bakery in town, but when I opened the door it wasn't David who stood on my porch. It was Tyler. "Grandma!" he exclaimed, launching himself into my arms. "Surprise!" Behind him stood Jessica, looking slightly uncertain but smiling. "Sorry to drop in unannounced. Tyler has been begging to check on his bird feeder, and since school's out for spring break." "No apology needed," I assured her, genuinely pleased. "Come in, both of you." Tyler raced immediately to the window, delighted to find his creation not only intact, but flourishing, surrounded by finches and chickadees. "They love it," he announced proudly. "Of course they do," Jessica said, her voice gentler than I remembered. "You made it with love." The echo of my own words from Christmas morning caught me by surprise. I glanced at my daughter, wondering if she remembered too. The slight color in her cheeks suggested she did. "Coffee?" I offered. "Please." As Tyler remained absorbed with the birds, Jessica and I moved to the kitchen. She noticed the legal papers on the table and hesitated. "I can come back later if you're busy with something important." "No, it's fine." Gestured for her to sit, just finalizing the Conservation Trust documentation. She nodded, a flicker of old tension crossing her face before she visibly relaxed. "That's good. It should be official." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "That's not what I expected you to say." Jessica's laugh held a note of self-awareness I hadn't heard before. "I've been doing some thinking these past few months about what Dad would have wanted, about what really matters." She glanced toward the living room where Tyler was now sketching the birds in a small notebook. "And I realized something important." "What's that?" "This place," she gestured around her, encompassing not just the house but the land beyond it. "It's worth more as it is than it could ever be worth divided up and sold off." I didn't see that before. I studied my daughter's face, searching for signs of the performative agreeability she'd sometimes employed to smooth over conflicts. Instead, I found what appeared to be genuine reflection. "What changed your mind?" I asked. She sighed. "Many things. Conversations with David, seeing how happy Tyler is here, remembering my own childhood on this land." She paused. And, honestly, Mom, seeing you stand up for yourself at Christmas, it made me realize how much this place means to you. Not as an asset, but as a home. The acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. After all these months, this was what I'd needed to hear, that she finally understood the difference between property and sanctuary. Thank you for that, I said softly. Jessica reached across the table and took my hand, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood self that my heart contracted. I'm sorry I tried to take over. Your house, your Christmas, your decisions about the future. It wasn't my place. No, it wasn't, I agreed. But I understand why you did it. You've always been a planner, a doer. Even as a little girl, you organized your dolls' lives with military precision. She laughed. I was insufferable, wasn't I? Strong-willed, I corrected. Like your father. He always said you'd either run a corporation or a small country someday. Instead, I'm trying to run my mother's life. Not much of an accomplishment. You're learning, I said gently. We both are. A comfortable silence settled between us, filled only by the distant sound of Tyler's excited whispers to the birds. For the first time in longer than I could remember, there was no tension humming beneath our interaction, no careful dance around unspoken expectations. There's something else, Jessica said finally. Matt and I are separating. The news shocked me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. The cracks in their relationship had been visible even before the Christmas debacle. I'm sorry to hear that, she shrugged, a gesture that aimed for nonchalance but didn't quite achieve it. It's been coming for a while. His focus on appearances, on status, on what things are worth rather than what they mean. I realized I don't want to live that way anymore. She glanced toward Tyler again, and I don't want him growing up with those values. That's a brave decision, I said. Terrifying is more. Like it, she admitted with a shaky laugh. I have no idea what happens next. Single motherhood at 45 wasn't exactly in my 5-year plan. The best things rarely are, I told her. Sometimes the plans we abandon open doors to paths we never imagined. She squeezed my hand. When did you get so wise? Around the time I stopped letting other people tell me what I wanted, I said with a smile. Tyler burst into the kitchen, interrupting our moment with the boundless energy of youth. Grandma, can we hang another bird feeder? I have a new design idea. Of course we can, I told him. I think there's some wood in the garage that would work perfectly. Can we start now, please? I looked to Jessica, expecting her to intervene with reminders about lunch plans or schedules to keep. Instead, she smiled and shrugged. It's your house, Mom, your rules. 4 simple words that acknowledged everything I'd fought for at Christmas. Your house, your rules. Later that afternoon, as the 3 of us worked together on Tyler's new bird feeder design, David arrived with fresh bread and local honey. He seemed unsurprised to find Jessica there, greeting her with a warmth that suggested their own relationship had been healing in the months since Christmas. We moved our impromptu workshop to the back porch, enjoying the spring sunshine as Tyler explained his elaborate vision for a bird mansion with multiple feeding stations. David sketched the design, making gentle suggestions about structural stability. Jessica, to my surprise, stayed out of the planning entirely, content to observe rather than direct. As I watched them work together, my children, my grandson, a profound sense of rightness settled over me. This was what I had protected the land for. Not just trees and open spaces, but moments like this, connections spanning generations, a place where memories could be made without price tags attached. That evening, after Jessica and Tyler had departed with promises to return the following weekend, I sat with David on the porch as twilight painted the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Good day? He asked, though he already knew the answer. The best, I confirmed. Jessica seems different. David nodded. She's been doing a lot of soul-searching since Christmas. The separation from Matt has been harder than she lets on, but I think it's pushing her to re-evaluate what really matters. Did you know about their problems? She's called me a few times, he admitted. Needed someone to talk to who wouldn't judge. The revelation warmed me, my children finding their way back to each other, rebuilding the bond that had frayed over years of different life choices and values. I'm proud of her, I said. It takes courage to change course mid-life. Like someone else I know, David observed with a smile. I laughed softly. I suppose so, though in my case it was less about changing course and more about remembering who I was all along. As night fell completely, the first stars appearing above the pecan tree, I thought about the journey of the past few months. From the chaos of that unwanted Christmas gathering had come an unexpected gift, the reclamation of my voice, my space, my autonomy. The conservation trust papers sat signed on my desk inside, ensuring that this land would remain as it was long after I was gone. The property Matt had seen only as development potential would continue as habitat for birds, as playground for future generations, as sanctuary for those who understood its true value. "You know," David said, interrupting my thoughts, "Dad would be proud of you, standing your ground, protecting what matters." "I think he would," I agreed, though he might have been more diplomatic about it. David chuckled. "Probably. But sometimes diplomacy isn't enough. Sometimes you need to hold up the deed and say, 'This is mine.'" I smiled at the memory, that moment in the living room when I'd finally found the courage to draw a line. "It wasn't just about the property," I said. "It was about being seen, being heard, being respected." "The deed was just a symbol," David nodded. "The real ownership you claimed was of your own life." His insight, as always, cut straight to the heart of the matter. In defending my land, I'd reclaimed much more than property rights. I'd reclaimed my dignity, my agency, my right to live on my own terms, not as an inconvenient placeholder until I was gone, but as a woman with valid needs and boundaries. "I've been thinking," I said after a comfortable silence, "about the house." David turned to me, curious. "What about it?" "It's too big for just me. Always has been since your father died." "Are you considering selling after all?" he asked, surprise evident in his voice. "No," I assured him. "The Conservation Trust prevents that, but I've been looking into establishing an artist's retreat program, using part of the house for visiting artists who need space and time to create. A residency program of sorts." David's face lit up with understanding. "Using the house as it was meant to be used, as a sanctuary, but sharing it on your terms." "Exactly. The land stays protected, but the house becomes something more than just my private domain. It becomes a place where new art is born, where creativity is nurtured." "Mom, that's brilliant," he said with genuine enthusiasm. "I know at least a dozen artists who would apply immediately." "I thought you might help me set it up," I suggested, "given your connections in the art world." "I'd be honored," he said, simply. As we sat together in the gathering darkness, the future unfolded before me with new clarity. Not the future Jessica and Matt had planned for me, one of diminishment and eventual erasure, but a future of my own design. One where this home continued to serve as a wellspring of life and creativity long after I was gone. I thought of Tyler's bird feeder, of Jessica's awakening, of David's quiet support. I thought of Richard's vision for this land, now secured through legal protection, and I thought of my own journey from accommodation to assertion, from silence to voice. The Christmas that Jessica had planned without my consent had indeed changed everything, just not in the way anyone had anticipated. It had forced a confrontation long overdue. It had revealed hidden agendas and unspoken assumptions. And most importantly, it had reminded me of a simple truth I'd somehow forgotten. This was my house, my land, my life, and finally, undeniably, my voice.